Jax's revenge domain. The breach alert hit my screen at 6:07 p.m. on a Thursday. I was wrapping up the weekly security audit when my monitoring system lit up like a Christmas tree. Unauthorized root access attempt. Someone had tried to clone the entire operational directory, research files, financial roadmaps, compliance logs, everything straight off the secured backbone I'd built from scratch. I'm Brady Collins, 49 years old, and I've been running cybersecurity operations longer than most of these corporate kids have been using smartphones. 20 years Navy, specialized in information warfare, and now owner of Tactical Systems LLC. What I built for Arkwell Dynamics wasn't just some file-sharing setup. It was a fortress. I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward. The folder they'd touched wasn't just data storage. It was the operational nerve center for 4 departments, and legally, it didn't belong to Arkwell. It belonged to me. The alert was specific. Massive download attempt, 2.3 terabytes, initiated from user account S. Murphy at 6:04 p.m. Shane Murphy, our new VP of Operations, 34 years old and fresh from McKinsey or some other consulting mill. He'd been with the company exactly 3 weeks and 2 days, walking around like he was the second coming of corporate efficiency. I'd seen his type before during my contractor days with the Pentagon. Clean suit, expensive watch, talks fast about optimization and streamlining legacy systems. Translation: fire the experienced guys, blame the infrastructure when everything breaks, collect bonus for cost savings, then disappear before the real consequences hit. Shane didn't just try to copy files. The logs showed something worse. At 6:05 p.m., 1 minute after the failed download, someone from his workstation attempted to rename the root security folder from Tactical SIS Primary Vault to Arkwell Strategic Obs 2024 SM. The guy was trying to rebrand my entire security architecture like it was a PowerPoint template. Before we go further, if you've ever spent 2 decades building something invisible but critical, then watched some newcomer try to hijack it without understanding what they're touching, you know that specific cold feeling in your spine. It's not anger. It's recognition. Someone just stepped on a landmine they didn't know was there. I didn't panic. 20 years in naval intelligence teaches you to document first, react second. I took screenshots of the breach attempt, archived the complete audit trail with timestamps, and exported the user activity logs showing Shane's fingerprints all over the attempted theft. Then I did what any professional does when someone violates operational security. I sent a brief, courteous email. Shane, heads up. Your access attempt this evening triggered multiple security flags on my end. Happy to discuss proper protocols whenever convenient. I didn't expect gratitude. I definitely didn't expect what came next. Shane had been making noise about modernizing our technology stack since his first day. Corporate speak for, I don't understand how any of this works, so I'm going to replace it with something simpler that I can control. In defense contracting, we called guys like Shane PowerPoint warriors. They could build beautiful slide decks about efficiency, but ask them to actually run the systems they're optimizing, and they'd crash everything within 48 hours. What Shane didn't know, what nobody in Arkwell's current leadership knew, was the real story behind their cybersecurity infrastructure. 5 years ago, Arkwell Dynamics was hemorrhaging money after a failed product launch nearly killed the company. Their IT security was held together with expired software licenses, prayer, and sheer luck. I came in through military contractor channels during their crisis, offering a lifeline. My company, Tactical Systems LLC, would build and maintain their entire operational security environment under a long-term master service agreement. That wasn't charity work, it was business. But the negotiation got intense because Arkwell's board was desperate, and I knew desperate clients make dangerous decisions later when they're back on their feet. So I insisted on specific language in the contract that would protect both parties if relationship dynamics changed. Section 11C of our MSA was crystal clear. Vendor retains exclusive administrative control of hosted infrastructure and associated digital assets unless revoked via board resolution with 30-day supervised transition protocol under Arkwell legal oversight and federal compliance review. The CEO who signed that contract was Marcus Webb, a former Boeing executive who understood contractor relationships. He knew that if you can't fund proper internal security, you better respect the vendor keeping your systems alive. He also knew that military contractors don't work like typical IT consultants. We build things to last, we document everything, and we always have contingency protocols. Marcus retired 18 months ago, The current CEO, Owen Taylor, inherited the contract along with the security infrastructure he'd never personally reviewed. And Shane Murphy, he probably saw shared drive access on some outdated org chart and assumed he could reorganize it like office supplies. Every Thursday at 4 p.m., I ran synchronization protocols with Arkwell's product and finance teams. Routine maintenance that kept their operations running smoothly. Boring work to anyone who didn't understand how many ways corporate data systems can fail catastrophically. Shane's team never attended these sessions, never asked questions about security protocols, never even acknowledged that someone outside their company was maintaining the infrastructure that allowed them to function every day. Until tonight, until Shane decided to help himself to 2.3 terabytes of classified operational data like he was downloading a movie. I stared at the breach logs again, cross-referencing the attempt timestamps with Arkwell's internal access records. At 6:02 p.m., Shane had logged into his company account normally. At 6:04 p.m., he'd attempted the mass download. At 6:05 p.m., he'd tried to rename my security folders. At 6:06 p.m., my system had automatically blocked all access from his workstation and flagged his user account for administrative review. At 6:07 p.m., my phone started buzzing with automated security alerts. Shane had no idea that my monitoring system wasn't just watching for external threats. It was designed to track internal corporate behavior, especially from users with elevated access privileges. Every click, every file request, every attempted system modification was logged, timestamped, and archived according to federal contractor standards. He definitely didn't know that attempting to mass download or rename contractor-controlled infrastructure triggered automatic legal notifications under our federal compliance protocols. My email notification system had already fired off copies of tonight's breach attempt to 3 different parties: Arkwell's legal department, my corporate attorney, and a secured federal contractor database that monitors cybersecurity incidents involving government-adjacent systems. All automated, all documented, all irreversible. I closed my laptop and headed home. Shane Murphy had just declared war on infrastructure he didn't own, using weapons he didn't understand, against an opponent who'd been preparing for this exact scenario since the day I signed that contract. Tomorrow was going to be educational. The termination email arrived at 8:02 a.m. Friday morning. Subject line, action required, immediate. I clicked it expecting another half-baked efficiency memo or Shane's latest alignment framework nonsense. Instead, I found 14 words that would detonate the next 3 months of his career. Send me the admin password for the shared systems and clean out your office today. No salutation, no context, no meeting request. Just exile by email from a guy who thought cybersecurity was something you could outsource and forget about. The message had been sent at 8:19 a.m., probably right after Shane's first coffee, like firing contractors was just another item on his morning checklist. That's when it hit me. Shane had absolutely no idea who he was dealing with. He saw my name on some outdated organizational chart, probably listed under IT vendors or legacy contractors, and assumed I was another overpaid consultant squatting on permissions he could revoke with a strongly worded email, someone he could sweep out during his first quarter optimization and move on. He didn't know about the federal contractor status. He didn't know about the compliance requirements. He definitely didn't know about Section 11C. I highlighted the termination demand, copied it to a secure archive, and started typing my response. One line, negative. This infrastructure operates under federal contractor license with DoD compliance requirements. Direct all questions to your legal department. I attached a copy of the signed master service agreement, specifically pages 23-24, where Section 11C laid out the termination protocols in language even a McKinsey consultant should be able to understand. Then I copied Arkwell's legal team and hit send. Shane probably thought I was bluffing, expected me to come crawling back when my access badge stopped working or my email got shut down. What he didn't understand was that Arkwell's entire operational backbone ran on my cloud infrastructure, maintained through my federal security clearance, monitored with tools I'd developed over 2 decades in naval intelligence. The moment he sent that termination email, he triggered something I'd built into the contract as insurance against exactly this kind of corporate arrogance. An automatic service-level agreement suspension protocol. Here's how it worked. If Arkwell attempted to terminate contracted services without proper board authorization and federal compliance review, all SLA obligations dissolved immediately. Not after a meeting, not after a grace period, immediately. The system would continue running because that was in everyone's interest, but updates, technical support, security patches, system backups, all suspended pending proper legal resolution. I opened my administrative dashboard and watched the service status indicators shift from green to amber. The countdown had officially started. Shane's email to legal came at 8:27 a.m., forwarding my response with the subject line, "Please handle this contractor issue," like I was some vendor disputing a parking ticket instead of the guy who'd kept their entire operation secure for the past 5 years. The legal department's response arrived 12 minutes later, forwarded to CEO Owen Taylor with a single devastating sentence. "Murphy just terminated our primary security contractor without board authorization." I didn't need to see Owen's reply. I could practically hear the phone calls starting, the emergency meetings being scheduled, the damage control conversations beginning. Meanwhile, I sat in my home office, completely calm. No panic, no celebration, just the quiet satisfaction that comes from watching physics take over. Gravity was going to do what gravity does. Shane had just given it a helpful push off a very high cliff. The beauty of Section 11C wasn't that it was hidden or deceptive. It was right there in plain English, clearly explained during the original contract negotiations 5 years ago. Marcus Webb, the CEO who'd signed it, had specifically asked about termination procedures because he understood that contractor relationships needed clear boundaries on both sides. "What happens if we need to end this arrangement?" he'd asked. "Board resolution with 30-day transition protocol," I'd explained, "that protects both parties. You get proper knowledge transfer. I get adequate notice to reassign resources. No surprises, no hostility, just professional transition." Marcus had nodded and signed. He understood that military contractors don't work like typical vendors. We build redundancy, we plan for contingencies, and we always have protocols for when relationships change. Shane Murphy, on the other hand, had just tried to fire me like I was an underperforming intern. At 8:39 a.m., legal called me directly. Tessa Morgan, their senior counsel, sounded like someone who just realized her weekend was about to disappear. "Brady, we need to discuss Shane's email this morning." "Nothing to discuss," I replied. "He terminated services without board authorization, per Section 11C, that triggers automatic SLA suspension pending proper legal review." "Can we schedule a meeting? Owen wants to resolve this quickly." "I'm sure he does, but the contract is clear. Board resolution required for any service termination. Until that happens, my company is released from all support obligations." Silence on the other end. "Then, how long does SLA suspension last?" "Until proper termination procedures are followed or services are formally reinstated." "Your choice." After hanging up, I activated the next phase of my contingency plan. I logged into the operations portal and implemented what I called custody mode. All user permissions frozen at current levels. No edits, no file transfers, no system modifications, no new user accounts. Arkwell's people could still view their existing files and access current dashboards, but they couldn't change anything. Every system interaction from that moment forward would be logged with a new header, archived under Tactical Systems LLC Custody Protocol Board Authorization required for modifications. It wasn't sabotage, it was preservation. Until Arkwell followed proper procedures for contract termination, I had a legal obligation to maintain their data integrity and prevent unauthorized modifications that could compromise federal compliance standards. Shane's second email arrived at 9:15 a.m., this time copied to half the executive team. "Need immediate resolution on contractor access issue. Business operations affected." Business operations affected. Like that was my problem to solve after he'd tried to fire me via email. The third email came at 10:33 a.m., marked urgent. "Brady, reconsider your position. We can work this out professionally. Too late for professionalism." He'd declared war at 8:19 a.m. Now he was living with the consequences. By lunchtime, Arkwell's internal systems were in chaos. Product teams couldn't access project files. Finance couldn't update quarterly reports. Marketing couldn't pull analytics data. Customer service couldn't modify client records. Nothing was lost or deleted. Everything still existed, perfectly preserved and secure. They just couldn't edit any of it because editing required administrative permissions that only I controlled, and I was no longer providing technical support due to Shane's unilateral contract termination. The beauty of custody mode was its simplicity. Arkwell could see everything they'd built over the past 5 years. They just couldn't touch it. Like a museum exhibit behind bulletproof glass. Shane's fourth email arrived at 2:47 p.m. This is affecting client deliverables. What do you want? What did I want? I wanted him to read the contract he just violated. I wanted him to understand that cybersecurity wasn't some commodity service he could switch on and off like a subscription. I wanted him to learn that 20 years of military experience and federal contractor credentials weren't things you dismissed with a morning email. But mostly, I wanted him to follow the procedures that had been clearly established 5 years ago by people smarter than both of us. I didn't reply. The contract was my reply. Section 11C was my reply. The frozen systems were my reply. By 5 p.m., Arkwell's entire operational infrastructure was effectively paralyzed. Not broken, not compromised, just locked in place while Shane learned the difference between shared drives and contractor-controlled federal security systems. Weekend was coming. This was going to be interesting. Monday morning hit Arkwell dynamics like a freight train carrying broken promises. I wasn't there to witness the chaos firsthand, but my automated monitoring system painted a vivid picture through access logs and failed system requests. The first SOS came at 7:43 a.m. from the product development team. Is the project roadmap system down for maintenance? Can't access Q4 deliverables folder. Then finance at 8:12 a.m. Emergency minus Q4 budget projections, showing reference errors across all worksheets. Need immediate IT support. Marketing chimed in at 8:31 a.m., increasingly desperate. Analytics dashboard completely frozen. Client presentation in 2 hours. Someone please help. That's what happens when your infrastructure isn't a tool you own. It's a person, and that person just got fired by email on a Friday afternoon. Every attempted file modification, every failed system access, every blocked user request pinged my monitoring system automatically. I ignored them all. I was no longer under contract to provide technical support, thanks to Shane's unilateral termination decision. By 9:15 a.m., Arkwell's internal Slack channels had devolved into full panic mode. Message threads with 60-plus comments, people tagging employees who'd left the company 3 years ago, desperate searches through old email chains for backup files that didn't exist. Someone in customer operations posted, "Found old client files on my local drive from 2022. Anyone else have recent backups?" The response was immediate and crushing. Local drives were never supposed to have client data. Everything was centralized through the secure system that Shane had just cut them off from. At 10:23 a.m., a junior project manager asked the question that made everything crystal clear. Why does every dashboard now say Property of Tactical Systems LLC at the bottom? Is that normal? 2 minutes later, that message was deleted. But screenshots live forever, and by 10:30 a.m., half the company understood what had actually happened. They hadn't lost access to their shared drives. They'd lost access to someone else's infrastructure that they'd been borrowing for 5 years. Shane's emergency all-hands meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m. Monday morning. I learned about it through automated calendar notifications that were still forwarding to my system, another oversight on their part. The meeting invitation was titled Operational Updates, Infrastructure Transition. Like this was a planned upgrade, instead of a 5-alarm disaster caused by his own incompetence. I didn't attend, obviously, but the fallout reached me through multiple channels. Tessa Morgan from Legal called at 11:47 a.m., sounding like someone who'd just watched a controlled demolition go sideways. "Brady, we need to talk about Shane's presentation this morning." "I'm sure you do." He told the entire company that we're transitioning to a more cost-effective internal system. Said the old contractor setup was inefficient and outdated. I almost laughed. How's that working out for him? Poorly, very poorly. Half the department heads are demanding explanations for why their teams can't access basic work files. The other half are asking why nobody told them about this transition beforehand. Maybe because there wasn't supposed to be a transition. Maybe because Shane violated federal contractor protocols and triggered automatic service suspension. Silence on the other end. Then, "Owen wants to meet with you today." "Emergency session. Can you come in this afternoon? I don't work for Arkwell anymore." I reminded her, "Shane terminated my services Friday morning, remember?" "Brady, please. People are calling their clients to explain why deliverables are delayed. We've got 12 departments that can't function normally. This is affecting real business operations. Then maybe you should follow the contract procedures that were established 5 years ago. Board resolution, 30-day transition protocol. Proper legal oversight. It's all written down. After hanging up, I decided to check something. I logged into my administrative portal and pulled up Arkwell's system usage statistics for the past 72 hours. The numbers were revealing. Failed access attempts, 1,247 blocked file modifications, 892 suspended user accounts requesting elevated privileges, 34 attempted password resets by non-authorized personnel. 15.6. Shane hadn't just inconvenienced a few people. He'd effectively paralyzed a 200-person company by firing the one person who maintained their digital infrastructure. At 1:15 p.m., my phone rang. Owen Taylor, CEO. I let it go to voicemail. He called back at 1:18 p.m. Voicemail again. Third call at 1:23 p.m. I answered. Brady, we need to resolve this situation immediately. Good afternoon, Owen. How can Tactical Systems LLC help you today? He caught the formal tone immediately. This isn't the time for games. Shane made a mistake. We understand that, but we've got clients asking questions, deadlines approaching, and people who can't do their jobs. Shane didn't make a mistake. I corrected. He made a decision. He decided to terminate contractor services without following established procedures. Now you're living with the consequences of that decision. What do you want? Financial compensation? A public apology? Just name your terms. I want your board to follow the contract procedures that Marcus Webb signed 5 years ago. Board resolution for service termination. Proper transition protocols. Federal compliance review. Everything that should have happened before Shane sent that email Friday morning. Owen's frustration was obvious. That could take weeks to organize. Board members are scattered across 3 time zones. We need immediate resolution. You needed immediate resolution before Shane fired me. Now you need proper procedure. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but the outcome was inevitable. Owen could offer money, apologies, even Shane's head on a platter, but he couldn't change the fact that federal contractor agreements have specific termination procedures for good reasons. At 3:30 p.m., I received an email that made everything worthwhile. Shane Murphy's resignation letter, forwarded to me accidentally by someone in HR who'd mixed up email addresses. The letter was brief and professional, but the subtext was clear. He was jumping ship before the real consequences hit. His replacement was announced 2 hours later. Jared Reynolds, an external consultant with extensive experience in crisis management and operational restructuring. Corporate speak for. We hired someone to clean up the mess our last guy created. Jared's first email to me came at 6:45 p.m. Monday evening. Brady, I understand there's been a communication breakdown. I'd like to schedule a call to discuss path forward on our infrastructure partnership. Infrastructure partnership. At least someone understood what this actually was. I replied briefly. Services suspended per Section 11C pending board resolution. Contract available through legal department. All questions should be directed to Arkwell's counsel. Tuesday morning brought fresh chaos. Without Shane to blame anymore, Owen had to explain to his board of directors why their entire company was effectively locked out of its own operational systems. The board meeting was scheduled for Wednesday morning, emergency session. Meanwhile, Arkwell's employees were getting creative. Some teams were sharing files through personal Google Drive accounts, a massive security violation that would have gotten them fired under normal circumstances. Others were reconstructing work from email attachments and printed documents. The facilities manager even tried calling building maintenance to fix the internet, thinking it was a connectivity issue. By Tuesday afternoon, word was spreading through their industry networks. Competitors were asking questions, clients were getting nervous, and trade publications were starting to notice that Arkwell's usually prompt responses had slowed to a crawl. I monitored it all through automated systems and professional contacts, watching Shane's 15-minute power trip turn into a company-wide crisis that would take months to fully resolve. The final irony came Tuesday evening, an automated security report generated by my own monitoring system, documenting 5 days of unauthorized attempts to access contractor-controlled infrastructure. The report was automatically forwarded to 3 parties per federal compliance requirements: Arkwell's legal team, my corporate attorney, and a federal contractor oversight database. Shane's original attempt to steal 2.3 terabytes of data was now officially part of a federal cybersecurity incident report, complete with timestamps, user identification, and detailed forensic analysis. Wednesday's board meeting was going to be very educational for everyone involved. Wednesday's emergency board meeting convened at 9 a.m. sharp. I wasn't invited, obviously, but the aftermath reached me through multiple channels within hours. Tessa Morgan called at 11:30 a.m., and for the first time since this started, she sounded relieved instead of panicked. "The board voted unanimously to reinstate your contract," she said. "Full restoration of services, retroactive to Friday morning. Owen wants to discuss compensation for the disruption." "That's a start," I replied. "What about the federal compliance review?" "Already initiated. We're bringing in external auditors to document the entire incident and ensure we're meeting all contractor oversight requirements." And Shane's unauthorized access attempt, being handled through appropriate channels. His resignation letter mentioned pursuing other opportunities, but the board is well aware of what actually happened. The formal reinstatement documents arrived by courier that afternoon. Proper board resolution, signatures from all voting members, and a revised service agreement that included additional protections against unilateral termination attempts. Owen had learned his lesson about respecting contractor boundaries, but the real satisfaction came from watching the restoration process. I didn't flip a switch and magically fix everything. That's not how federal contractor protocols work. Instead, I initiated a careful, methodical system reactivation that took 72 hours to complete. Every step was documented. Every change was logged, and every restored capability was verified through multiple security checks. Thursday morning, I reactivated read-write access for critical systems, payroll, client communications, emergency operational files. Department heads could finally update project statuses and respond to client inquiries that had been backing up for 6 days. Friday, I restored full file editing capabilities and system modifications, but with enhanced monitoring protocols. Every user action would now be tracked with additional detail, and any unusual access patterns would trigger immediate notifications. By the following Monday, Arkwell's systems were running better than they had in months. The forced downtime had given me an opportunity to implement security updates and performance optimizations that had been scheduled for later in the year. The human cost was significant, though. 3 major clients had delayed contract renewals due to Arkwell's communication gaps during the crisis. 2 department heads had submitted their resignations, citing operational instability and concerns about management decision-making. Shane's replacement, Jared Reynolds, spent his first month just rebuilding relationships and explaining to various stakeholders why their primary vendor had temporarily suspended services. Owen called me personally on the Monday after full restoration. "Brady, I owe you an apology. Shane's actions were unacceptable, and the board takes full responsibility for not providing proper oversight." "Apology accepted," I said. "But let's make sure this doesn't happen again." "Agreed. We're implementing mandatory contractor relations training for all senior management." No one gets to make decisions about vendor agreements without understanding the legal implications. Smart policy. You might also want to review your hiring practices. Shane's background check probably should have caught his tendency to make unilateral decisions without understanding consequences. 3 weeks later, I received the final piece of validation, a federal cybersecurity compliance audit triggered by Shane's original data theft attempt concluded that Tactical Systems LLC had maintained exemplary security protocols and appropriate response procedures during an unauthorized access incident. The audit report specifically noted that my decision to activate custody mode and suspend services had prevented potential data compromise and maintained system integrity during a period of corporate leadership instability. Shane Murphy's name appeared in that federal report as the perpetrator of unauthorized access attempts against contractor-controlled infrastructure. That report would follow him to any future employer requiring security clearance or federal contractor status. 6 months after the crisis, I attended an industry conference in Denver where Owen Taylor was giving a keynote on vendor relationships in modern corporate architecture. I sat in the back row curious to hear how he'd frame the experience. We learned that critical infrastructure partnerships require the same level of attention and respect as any other strategic business relationship, he told the audience. You can't treat contractors like disposable vendors, especially when they're maintaining systems that your entire operation depends on. Someone in the audience asked about operational transparency and vendor oversight. Owen cleared his throat. We had what you might call a learning experience. A new executive assumed he could terminate our primary security contractor unilaterally without understanding the legal and operational implications. The resulting system lockdown affected our entire company for nearly a week. He paused, then added something that surprised me. The contractor was completely within his rights to suspend services. We violated our own contract procedures and faced the consequences. It was expensive, embarrassing, and entirely avoidable if we'd simply followed the agreements we'd signed. The audience nodded politely. Someone asked about cost implications. Significant, Owen replied bluntly. Between delayed deliverables, client relationship repair, and emergency consulting fees, that one email probably cost us around $400,000 in direct costs, plus immeasurable damage to our reputation and vendor relationships. After the presentation, I approached Owen in the lobby. He saw me coming and actually smiled. "Brady, didn't expect to see you here. Good presentation," I said. "Honest assessment of what happened. Well, if you're going to screw up that badly, might as well learn something from it and help others avoid the same mistake." Any word on Shane's new position? Owen's expression darkened slightly. Last I heard, he was working for a small consulting firm in Phoenix. Apparently, his security clearance application was denied due to incidents involving unauthorized access to federal contractor systems. Makes it hard to find work in the defense sector. Consequences tend to follow people, I observed. They do indeed. As I walked back to my hotel that evening, I reflected on the entire experience. Shane Murphy had tried to fire me with a Friday morning email, assuming I was some disposable IT contractor who could be replaced over a weekend. Instead, he'd discovered that 20 years of naval intelligence experience and federal contractor credentials aren't things you dismiss casually. He'd learned that cybersecurity infrastructure isn't office furniture you can rearrange at will. And he'd found out that respect isn't something you can demand, it's something you earn by understanding what you're dealing with. The final irony was that I'd never wanted to hurt Arkwell or its employees. The contract protections I'd built in weren't meant to be weapons, they were meant to be boundaries. Professional safeguards that protected both parties when relationship dynamics changed. Shane had crossed those boundaries deliberately and aggressively. The consequences that followed weren't revenge, they were physics. Actions and reactions, cause and effect, documented in legal language and executed through automated systems I'd built specifically to handle this type of situation. A year later, Tactical Systems LLC was busier than ever. Word had spread through the defense contractor community about the Arkwell incident, and companies were reaching out for security assessments and contract reviews. Turns out a lot of organizations wanted to work with someone who took professional boundaries seriously. I never sought publicity for what happened. Didn't need to. In the military contractor world, reputation spreads through professional networks, and professionalism under pressure is the currency that matters most. Shane Murphy learned it the hard way, and Owen Taylor learned it just in time to save his company from complete operational collapse. As for me, I kept doing what I'd always done, building secure systems, maintaining professional standards, and protecting the people who depended on infrastructure they couldn't see, but definitely couldn't live without. Some battles you win by fighting harder. Others you win by building better boundaries and letting physics handle the rest. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones who shout threats. They're the quiet professionals who built the infrastructure you depend on and know exactly how to defend it when boundaries are crossed. In the corporate world, respect isn't earned through titles or aggressive emails, it's earned by understanding what you're dealing with before you try to control it. Because competence backed by proper legal frameworks always outlasts arrogance backed by assumptions.